this is in so many ways a wrong moment on some levels for us, in that it's our last hurrah, if you like, with Sharon, who, as you would all know from the information that you were sent, is finishing her time with PASMA after 20 years on the board, which is why, though, we asked you to a celebration of those 20 years. And I think the other thing that is really exciting for Sharon too is the celebration of all of those wonderful things she'll now be able to do, while she won't have to worry about us, except that we will be so busy still contacting her about all the things we'll need that she's not going to get the peace she thought she would.
I might begin by saying what a great pleasure and privilege it is to be here tonight. But that is the case every time I come to PASMA. So, we all know that Port Arthur has a certain magic that draws you back, and it certainly has done that for me. So, obviously at Port Arthur, we have immensely important World Heritage values. We also have values to you here in the community. The heritage of the community of the peninsula lies in Port Arthur, as we know. So, using the Borough Charter, you are able to ensure that all of these values are protected. And I suppose that's one of the things that's been also most important to me, working with the Borough Charter, teaching the Borough Charter, thinking about the Borough Charter and what it says. It's very simple. It says, look for all the values, not just the ones that you think are there, and then manage the place to protect all those values. And of course, that's what we do at Port Arthur.
What have you seen happen over the last 20 years since you've been here? Because it's interesting for so many people. I'm sure in this room you've had friends who you've brought and they've said, I can't believe how much this place has changed. But for someone who's been here incrementally but not here the whole time, I think it'd be really interesting for you to point out some of the things that aren't just necessarily the big changes, but some of the incremental changes that have appeared with the way you have seen the site and our sites progress.
Thank you, Jane. Well, this does relate to the first question you asked me, because I guess there are a number of things that I have seen change in the 20 years I've been here. One of the really important things has been government recognition of the importance of the site. When we arrived here, it was a government business enterprise, and you were supposed to use the gate takings to conserve the site, full stop. And there was really no recognition by the government, and when I say the government, I mean regardless of which government it was, regardless of whether it was Labor or Liberal or whatever, there was not a recognition of the great value of this site for Tasmania generally, and of its values, and also a recognition that it could return to Tasmania and to the community, especially the community on the peninsula, a huge amount more than it costs to run it and conserve it. And over the years, the board has worked very hard and successfully to convince the government of the values of Port Arthur for the nation, internationally now, for the nation and for Tasmania. I've seen the community turn from a group who were very resentful of parks and then PASMA, who basically took over their town centre and said, this is far too important for you, the community, to live here. You have to move because this is so important. And of course, it was the community that had conserved what was conserved. It was the community who had made their own life here and who had their own history of this place. So one of the other major things that I've seen happen is working with the community in all the ways you know. Firstly, the establishment of the Community Advisory Committee, but going on from that, the integration and the recognition of the role of the community in the significance of the site. And that, for me, has been a great thing to see. I think that World Heritage International recognition is, of course, something that we've achieved. It's made a huge difference. And along with that, I have seen the staff at PASMA become a staff of international excellence. The practices here, the conservation practices, the management practices, the work with the community, all of these things have become a standard of international excellence which people come to see and to visit. So it's not just we have made a great experience for the visitors, it is we have made a place which is worthy of the story. We have made a management system and we have a staff who are worthy of curating this fabulous place.
I'd like to take this opportunity to hand over to Michael Field, who you would all, I'm sure, know is the Deputy Chair of our board. And Michael has a couple of special messages for you.
Thank you.
Sharon, I don't know whether to sit down or stand up. I think I'll sit. Well, look, there are several messages here of people, you know, Helen Lardner, Ian Borsma, Richard Mackay, etc. But the most important one is from Barry Jones. And I'd like to read out Barry's message. Rachel and I much regret that we will not be with you at Port Arthur to celebrate Sharon's extraordinary contribution to heritage in general and PASMA in particular. We will be there in spirit, although in a materialistic age that's not quite the same. Sharon Sullivan, AO-FAHA, FICOMOS. No. Barry's looked it up. Has an international reputation as an archaeologist and heritage manager. She has worked extensively overseas, especially with China and the Getty Institute. I first worked with her in Paris in 1995 when I theoretically led the Australian delegation to UNESCO's General Assembly. I say theoretically because Sharon was my minder, knew far more about the subject than I did. She firmly pulled me into line with a sharp intake of breath or a gesture. And I think once a kick on the ankle. But that could have been inadvertent. So you're in a list of a few people who Barry says knew much more than him. But she was always formidable. When Evan Walker retired as chair of PASMA in 2000 and I was appointed to succeed him, I was determined to persuade Sharon to join the board. She soon became my deputy and gave years of faithful service. The troika of Stephen Lard, Sharon Sullivan and me worked together harmoniously and effectively. When it was time for me to depart, long overdue, some said, Sharon was the obvious replacement. In her 7 years chair, PASMA's reputation as one of the greatest sites on the World Heritage List has been enhanced considerably. She has served Port Arthur with exemplary dedication. She is a great Australian who has written important books, shrewd and unsparing in her judgment, a powerful advocate and an exceptional mentor to many. I wish her and Marlon every happiness. So that's from Barry Jones. Sharon's seen fire and she's seen rain because in her period as chair of Port Arthur, we've had floods and we've had fires. And we've had huge changes. Flowing from the flood was the penitentiary emergency. And Sharon, that was very big, I think, because there was some doubt, remember, on the board of board members about whether we could afford to do it. And we had to do it, and no government obviously wanted the prospect of not giving money and seeing the penitentiary fall down, so we did get government support, but the lobbying was done by you and Stephen, and everyone here is thankful that the symbol of Port Arthur remains in such a state. We know Sharon to have total dedication to this site, to be a very empathetic leader who worked hard at bringing the board and more broadly the staff of Port Arthur along with the board. No one could ever doubt the sincerity and the conviction that Sharon showed in her leadership, and she will leave a huge effect on all of us whom she's touched while she's been not only a board member but as chair of the board. And for that reason, it's an honour for me to, on behalf of us all, thank Sharon for her dedicated service.
For me, it's been one of the great privileges and pleasures of my life to be at Port Arthur. I first came here when Brian was here, and I fell in love with the place, as other people do. I then was involved with it after the massacre when I was at the when I was at the Australian Heritage Commission. And after that, of course, I was recruited by Barry Owen Jones. So I've had a very long association with it, and I've been in love with it the way everyone here is, I think. It's a very, very special place, and it affects people. So it has the same sort of eminence and power and numinousness which Uluru has. If you've ever been to Uluru, you will know. This place has a really different feeling, but it has the same power. And it's been such a privilege and a pleasure to be here, to share this with you, to be involved with the community, and I must say, to be involved with our fabulous board and the fabulous staff. And, you know, I know if he's anywhere around, he's probably going to hit me, but I have to say to you, Stephen Large. I mean, Stephen was here. He has been here through almost this whole period. And if anyone is responsible for steering us with the staff, with the board, it is Stephen. Okay. So I would like to say thank you all very much. And I don't want to be doing a commercial, but I really do think it's important for you to recognise that the Tasmanian government is doing something exceptional in terms of looking after heritage places in the way in which it's looking after Port Arthur. It's not usual for that to be, for the power and the importance to Tasmania of Port Arthur to be recognised by politicians. And this is something else that I think is very important. I could go on thanking everybody all night, but I would just like to say that I think the staff of Port Arthur is the most passionate group of people I've ever had to deal with. This, of course, sometimes causes problems, but it's that dedication and that love that they transfer to the visitors that's so terrific. And, of course, the community is just, you've been through so much, really. I mean, you know, moved out of here, told it wasn't important, told you weren't important in the story, and you've come back. So thank you all so much for a most fabulous 20 years for me. Thank you so much.